Martinez, joining me in the lounge room all the way from Portugal. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're actually in a little place not all that far away from Fatima.
Yep. G'day. Yep. I'm here in Fatima. Well, no, I'm just outside Fatima, about 25 minutes away.
Okay, and I've got to ask, what takes you to Portugal?
Well, I've been coming here for about a good 7 years, helping out making wine. So I've kind of come here now more permanently to help on the vineyard that I normally pick grapes from and make wine. But this time I'm going to be doing sort of like a bit of a cycle. So starting with the pruning and see where we go, because it hasn't been pruned in about 3 years.
Okay, so you're a bit of a wine junkie.
I like to drink wine, and I have been working in vineyards now for the last 2.5 years.
Okay.
And been learning as I go along, but I haven't actually made it, although I did make a little bit of wine this year.
Okay, so many questions I want to ask you on everything you just said, but I'm just going to pick up on something first. Your accent doesn't sound like you're a Portuguese native. So where were you born?
Well, I was born in London.
Yep. Okay.
And within the sound of the Bow Bells, so I'm officially a Cockney, but as you can see from my colouring, I'm not 100% English, and my dad's Spanish. So, but I grew up in England.
Okay. So how long were you in England?
That'd be giving away my age. So.
Well played. Well played. Okay. You grew up in England, and you're now in Portugal. But yeah. I happen to know, and you just inferred, that you went to places in between. So it'd be safe to say you're a pretty well-travelled individual.
Yes. I mean, I had a lot of opportunities to travel when I was younger. So from about, I think my first big sort of travel was when I was 18, and I did quite a few places in Europe with my brother and some friends. Then when I was 21, I went to live in the Cayman Islands for about nearly 2 years. And that was interesting, really nice, really hot, really humid, probably kind of heat you're experiencing right now.
Yeah.
And
why? Just the opportunity came up and you wanted to go to the Cayman Islands?
Yeah, it's in the middle of nowhere, sort of 200 miles south of Miami. Yeah. I worked in private banking.
Okay.
That's where I was in that direction at the time.
Nice little tax haven.
A little tax haven, yes. I didn't have any money because you kind of at the time needed about £1 million to invest in to have an account there, really. So yeah. So I worked for a Spanish bank there, very well-known Spanish bank, which has been incorporated by another now. And then I worked in the liquor business, believe it or not. I worked for a liquor store, and I managed a liquor store for about a year. That was interesting. And I actually got to know a lot of Aussies over there who used to come in during our curfew times when we had bad weather, like hurricane weather. And the Kiwis and the Aussies would literally come in and clean us out of alcohol. And I was like, I want to go to their parties.
It's really good for the national reputation. And the sad part is I know that to be true. That sort of seems to be the national stereotype, and I don't think that's an accident. But continuing on with your story, so Cayman Islands, working in a bottle shop. At what stage? When did you become interested in wine? Was that something you always passionate about?
I didn't even like wine. I hated wine. I was a beer drinker. I never really let any red wine touch my lips because I'd had a couple of like migraine episodes, and they'd said, well, you need to stay away from red wine. And I actually just didn't like it at the time.
Can't handle the good stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. It was by chance that I got into red wine, and I didn't know anything about it, but I was in France, in Paris, and I was with family, and they took me to somebody's house, and he had a cave downstairs which had oodles and oodles of wine, and he was cooking and getting me to try these wines, and I kept saying to him, "You're really sick." And he said, "No, trust me." He said, "You won't be." I said, "Okay." So I trusted him, and we had the most amazing food. Yeah. And he kept bringing these bottles. I think we're at least 100 years old. It was like nectar. And I thought, wow, if this is what I've been missing out on, I need to find out more about this.
Yeah.
But it wasn't again until much later that I actually got into wine.
Okay. And wine has sort of, if I understand correctly, afforded you an opportunity to do a lot of traveling in a lot of other places around the world, like South America. And if you could just rattle off some of the places that you have traveled through. And I think that travel was sort of you pursuing your love of two things you're very passionate about, one being wine, the other being your Catholicism, that fingers crossed we'll be able to discuss a little bit later. But if you could spend a little bit of time talking about that and the different places that those two things have taken you.
Well, I suppose the wine journey started pretty much with my pilgrimage journey, really, because about 20 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer, I attended quite a few pilgrimages with the society, and a lot of the places that you know, France, Spain, Italy, where all the pilgrimage sites are huge wine grain regions. So I used to couple up my holidays. In fact, I went on holiday for pilgrimages, but then sort of stuck around for a little bit longer and then sampled all the wines. Mm-hmm. So it kind of morphed together, if you like. And that's kind of been my pilgrim progress with wine, really. It's just going to different places. And South America was an amazing opportunity because I did set up everything. I decided to jack in my job in the UK, in London, which was I was a high-flying PA. And I just thought, I don't want to, sit behind a desk all of my life. And I'd been coming here, for the last 7 years, making wine. I thought, why don't I just take a leap? And I did. I sold up everything. I took myself off. I went to Australia. I went to New Zealand. I travelled around visiting wineries and vineyards. I put myself on courses. I went on what they call workaways, where they kind of slave labour working in people's vineyards.
Yeah.
And eventually, obviously coupled, like I say, with everything. For example, I went to Ecuador, to Quito, and saw Our Lady of Good Success. That was one of my missions, to get there. And I visited vineyards around there and met people in Chile, Argentina. So I went to the Mendoza region, and I had friends that were there. I knew society people that lived there, and obviously met a huge amount of people, people sort of traveling anyway. And they all seem to be interested in wine too. So it's fantastic. Mm. I think I digressed a bit.
No, digressing is my favourite, but I'm going to help you a little bit. So it's one thing to decide that you have a fascination and an interest in wine and you like wine. Like, I know lots of people who like wine. I know some people that love wine, and then I know some people who are fascinated with wine. I don't know many people who have pretty much left their old life behind to pursue their love of wine and actually live in a Portuguese vineyard, which is effectively what you're doing right now. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So how did that happen?
Well, it must be divinely inspired, because this place has been left to ruin for the last 4 years. And no one has really attempted to touch the grapes. And I wasn't in a position before, because obviously following my travel, I had to sort of go back to work. So I found a job immediately when I got back from traveling, and I ended up working for a very large English winemaking company and grape growing, and that's Chapel Down. And they make some of the best white sparkling wines in Europe. In fact, they've won quite a few awards and have, beaten even the Champagne region.
Yeah. I was talking to some people recently, and they said that the UK, the southern UK wine industry has just gone through the roof. Contentiously, some people allege the global warming. I don't know what impact that has. I don't know, but that seems to be what some people suggest. Once upon a time, you couldn't grow wines in the UK, and then recently, all of a sudden, the UK is just producing some great wine. So I don't know why. I just thought that was an interesting comment. But
it is, and And I remember your dad actually talking about wines and how they progressed over the last few hundred years. But you got to remember, obviously, England was, had the Romans. They were making wine back then. It was warm, even right up to Scotland. And I think that's actually starting again, because there's even vineyards in Aberdeen, of all places. So it's not impossible. We have the right terroir. We have the right, climate now. It's still not warm enough for some of the red grapes to ripen fully, except for the Pinot Noir. That's a pretty hardy grape. So yes, I'd have to agree with that. We are perhaps, maybe the earth is going through a slightly warm, it's warming up, and then it will cool down when it wants to.
Cyclical. So what about Portugal? So I'd imagine the environs and the elements that you'd get in Portugal where you are now would be a little bit different to what you would have previously experienced in the UK. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, at the moment, I'm sort of going through a bit of a learning curve. I've got to know a couple of other wine growers. They're organic, happen to be organic ones, and I'm going to be helping them out. They're pruning the vines out here, which I can probably show you in a little bit, but they're pretty wild. Obviously, my one are particularly wilder than usual because there were fires here 3 years ago. So it killed off a lot of the vines, which is pretty sad. However, there are probably a good 60% of the vines which are still able to produce, I think. Now it's just a case of pruning them correctly so that we get the best out of them for next year. And in England, the way it's pruned, it's a much simple process because you're growing the grape from the beginning. You've got the right trestling in place. We have electric secateurs. It's a standardized operation over there. Whereas here, it's slightly different, and everything, the way you see it, I think with Portugal, it's a labour of love.
Is it
especially when you're yourself.
Could you say old world compared to the new world, where you really see industrialization and capitalism come in and all this, sophisticated machinery, as opposed to this little provincial vineyard, which is hundreds of years old, where the people get out there and they, wear their hands away, picking in really difficult terrain. I mean, I'm not necessarily sure if that's exactly where you are, but sort of painting the picture between old, new, and you see that in the style, and you also see that in the wines produced.
That's exactly right, Tom, because over here, there isn't a standardized process. There are with the bigger organizations, but most people, everyone, when you go through all these rural towns, everyone's growing grapes, everyone's making their own table wine, and it's not bad. I mean, it's not like 100-year-old, beautiful Burgundy, Merv, anywhere in France, you find, or Italy, these lovely, lovely wines. But again, if they're manufactured, I can say New Zealand, Australia, they're able to do things on a mass scale. There's a few more chemicals involved. Whereas here, you may use a little bit of sulfur. I'm not using anything. We made wine this year in these 2 small vats, and literally it's just wine, no, just grapes. So we'll see what happens. Because we made wine 3 years ago. We've got it downstairs. One of them's just going off, but the other one is still going very, very strong. So it is a labour of love. It can go wrong, and very often it does. But I think it's all about cleanliness, really, at the end of the day, keeping things as clean as possible.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about...
If I answered your question there.
Yeah, no, it did. Beautifully. Best answer I could have possibly asked for. Could you spend a little bit of time talking about where exactly you are? So the particular property, does it have a story, a little bit of history about it?
It sure does. There was a lovely Filipino lady who bought the house predominantly because she wanted to be closer to Fatima and but the land came with it, with the grapes. So my brother came over about 10 years ago and helped her set up and helped pretty much organise the whole place. And then he said to me, Tam, could you come over? Could you bring some of your friends? Because he knew I like to travel. He knew I like to do pilgrimages. And he said, this is Fatima. I mean, this is the one place people want to come. So over the years, we've had quite a few Antipodeans come over and help pretty much drink the wine, pick the grapes as well. But it's been such great fun. And with Fatima literally being 25 minutes away for us, it's fantastic. And we're in a little town nearby called Tamar, which is an old medieval town where the Knights Templar reside. And there's a beautiful convent at the top of a hill. It's just such an idyllic place, really. When the sun is shining, and even when it's raining, it's still beautiful. I could potentially show you, so you can see why I'm attracted to the place. Would you like to see?
I think that would be a good idea. Let's do it. Take us for a walk.
All right, I'll take you for a very quick walk.
So we're about to step out into the world of Portugal. That is stunning. That is absolutely beautiful. And is this inland or coastal?
I'm about 150 k's in from Nazaré, which is a very, very cool spot for surfers. Mm-hmm. It's a big hangout. The biggest waves you've ever seen in the Atlantic Ocean. It's just about a good hour away from here. So it's quite nice to have best of both worlds, really. Okay,
and Portugal sort of being the long country that's on the left of Spain on the map, on the Iberian Peninsula, sort of northern Portugal, southern Portugal. You're sort of towards the south.
Well, actually, I'm north of Lisbon, for about an hour and a half north of Lisbon and about 2 hours south of Porto.
Okay. So if this is Portugal here, are you sort of towards the top or towards the bottom?
Halfway down.
Okay.
That makes sense.
All right.
And you know what else is cool about Tamar? It's actually on the pilgrimage route to Compostela, Santiago de Compostela.
There you go. So one day when I get to do the Compostela, so I'm not sure if I've bored you with this story before, but I was so close to doing the Camino de Compostela. I've obviously told you that. Well done for you. No, but I'm going to tell you again anyway. I was so close to doing it at the start of the year, and then the world imploded and I didn't do it. And now the plans have completely changed and I don't know if I'll do it. But one day, fingers crossed, one day I'm going to be able to do it. And then might have to come and visit the vineyard.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can do Fatima vineyard, and walk it again if you like.
How good would that be? Varietals. What sort of grape varietals do you grow in that area? Just for the uneducated wine enthusiast.
Well, this is the embarrassing part. I can't lie, but I actually don't know what that grape is out there. They never knew. They lost the paperwork. I'm having it tested, so I'm going to know quite soon. But we're in the Alentejo region. It's highly likely that they're a variety of Alentejo because they grow well here. Yeah. It's slightly clay here. It's actually not very nice, but vines grow in most places. They can even grow in sand. So, they dig down deep if you put them down, and they don't really irrigate. So they pretty much do their own thing the whole year round. I think it's when you first plant, you have to irrigate. And in fact, in England, we did as well. But now it's the rainy season. So I guess they're storing up all their water and they'll be good to go for next year. Yeah. And what is the soil like where you are? It's very clayey. A bit of iron ore, quite shelly. I suppose that's possibly from, when I say shelly, it's sort of quite grainy. Mm-hmm. It's not that rich, dark soil that you think you'd want. I mean, it just depends on the grape, but yeah, I'd say around here, predominantly clay. Yeah. It's very steep. Okay. Now, before, I'm going to ask you one more wine-related question before we plunge into deeper things. Take me through a day in the life of a wine enthusiast / wine worker. So where you are, what you actually do is you make wine, and that this is a 365-day a year cycle. Like you've got to prepare the vines, you've got to tend to the vines to make sure that when you harvest, etc., then you go into the winemaking process. So it's all consuming. Can you just give me a bit of and the listeners a bit of a snapshot into what goes into what you do? Well, obviously it's going to be slightly different here for me this year. Having started now since August, I've been clearing away the land, which is something you'd probably do at the end of harvest. So at the end of harvest, you'll have lots and lots of branches everywhere, lots of debris. By sort of end of December, beginning of January, people here will start pruning. Prunings all go to one side. You can burn them. Some people mulch them back into the ground. You're going to be leaving a couple of canes with some spurs obviously for the year after. You'll probably tie down the canes that you have to get them to train them and keep them dormant for a little bit. Then once you've tied everything down, you can pretty much relax, drink wine, make nice stews in the winter, chill. And then come spring, sort of late February, you're going to start doing a little bit of undervine cultivation. Especially here, I've been doing a lot of clearing of the land, and I'll be doing that on my own with some help with neighbours who are coming in to help out because they want me to go and prune their grapes, their vines, I mean.
Okay, and so if I can just interject there, when you talk about pruning and clearing, why do you prune? What impact does pruning and what importance does pruning have in the process of preparing a vine for growing grapes?
Well, you want the vine to produce grapes, so you're going to have to take off all the branches and get them to concentrate and have enough buds on one cane or two canes, however much you want to make the vine work. You're basically pruning and keeping as many buds, like I say, for the next year. So then the shoots will grow in the early spring. Hopefully you don't get a ground frost that sort of kills off any buds. If that happens, you might have secondaries. It's quite a long process because you have to look at a vine. You've got to look at the way it's going, in which direction you want the sap all to go in the right direction. So when you're cutting,
so metaphorical. It's just brilliant, the numbers of metaphors you can draw from vines and wine. Sorry, I interrupted. Keep going.
No, that's it really. That's pretty much all I can tell you about pruning. It's a lot of science. It is actually a science a little bit. You have to know more or less the way the grape is going, the vine is going, so that you can just create that sort of flow.
So it's almost like you're fostering and nurturing the wine.
And you're telling it where you want the fruit. You're telling it where you want the fruit set. I don't want the fruit set on the floor. So you don't let the branches go all the way down onto the floor because it's going to be harder. They'll get ruined, You need airflow. So when I go out there, I'm going to start training them so that they're going to be sort of at waist level so that I don't have to bend down and pick my grapes. They've got to be in a certain place where I can see when you get, like I say, air to go through. Anyway, in spring, you'll start seeing the budding happening. Again, like I say, undervine cultivation is kind of key. It stops disease. You can keep an eye on any pests that there are.
What sort of pests do you get over there? Was there ever a big phylloxera sort of issue in Portugal?
Probably around about, a few hundred years ago, yes.
Yeah.
But they're saying, I've been speaking to the local growers here, and they said there is a particular bug that's getting in. They're looking at trying to find different kind of rootstocks that's basically going to prevent that in the future. But it's a tricky one. I haven't seen it out here. Fingers crossed. It's not going to happen. But you don't know. It could locust. It could have anything.
Okay. So you're a gardener.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I am, and I love that gardening aspect of it. I just being out in the vines and watching them grow and seeing the different developments, through the budding process and the flowering, and then in spring, I'm just trying to think. The undervine is the most thing because you don't want any weeds coming along to sort of compete with the vine. So you may do. If it's particularly, sunny, you might have a lot of leaf, and you might want to do, I don't know, come June, you might want to do a bit of a pluck, take away a few leaves in the key areas. You might even want to cull some of the grapes to get the other sort of other bunches to grow better.
Yep.
But I don't know what it's going to be like this year. I'm sort of working sort of on the basis of what I did in the UK for the last 2 years. I'm hoping it will be a similar situation here.
Okay.
But we don't harvest here until mid-September. So really, it's just a case of looking after the vines and looking after the weeding. Really, that's pretty much all there is to it.
And can you paint a little bit of a picture of the terroir that you've got over there? So I'd imagine, I've never actually been to Europe, much to my shame, but I'd imagine, so you were talking about the UK, and one of the interesting things about the UK is people always say it's cold and it's overcast. No, we're good. We're good. We're still winning.
I just needed to put my phone onto charge. Sorry.
No, that's good. That's good. It's these little things that are actually terrific. People find them highly entertaining. So no, that's cool. Australia, low altitude, enormous country, but very, very different for the most part terroir than you get in Burgundy, Bordeaux, those places that just produce perfect, magical Pinot, Chardonnay, etc. So what, is in relation to where you are, can you paint a little bit of a picture, high altitude, low altitude, overcast all the time, lots of rain, or relatively dry? What are you dealing with in terms of the elements where you are?
Well, there have been quite a few Australians who've come over here and felt very at home because particularly in this part of the world, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of eucalyptus trees. So as soon as you go outside, the first thing that hits you is either the eucalyptus smell, and there's huge amounts of them everywhere. It's very lush, very green, lots of pine trees as well. So they basically, some of the Aussies that came over here said they felt very much at home. Oh. It's very, like I say, verdant green. I think if you were to go to the south, and I haven't been south, like down in the Algarve, it's a little bit drier, a bit more sort of desert-like, But over here, predominantly from where I am above Lisbon and further north, and north of Spain, it's all extremely green.
Okay. Is it there's a variety called, I think it's Vino Verde, or
Vino Verde,
the green juice,
popular,
or okay. Huh, go on. And so the reason I asked that was, what impact do those elements have in relation to how you prepare the vine and do your pruning and do your cultivation of that?
I know at the moment there's a lot of water, there's a lot of rain at this time of year, but it's necessary. It's a storing up of what they need. In Europe, we're pretty lucky with our seasons. We're getting the 4 seasons, and even here, just further north, I've heard that there's snow, which is not a bad thing because that does kill off some of the bugs that you don't want. But at the moment, I'm just working on the same preset really as England, and what's happening over there, or Italy, or unless it's going to be a really, really super, super hot summer, which we don't know, rain really doesn't affect it. And because we get so much sun over here, that's really the key thing that you need for grapes. So you just know you're guaranteed it. Even today, by the way, this is not like England. In England, when it says it rains, it doesn't just rain and stop. It just keeps literally raining, spit. Whereas here, it just rains, it floods, and then the sun comes out. And you're like, that's it, it's done.
Yeah.
Which I quite like, I must admit.
How good is that? Okay, so
I wouldn't want to be in England right now.
Oh, why not? Too cold, too rainy? Why wouldn't you want to?
There's a lot of snow at the moment.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, I spent the last 2 winters pruning in -2, and it's just a killer. And I'm really looking forward to doing it here in 2 and up, So.
Okay, all right. Well, any day of the week and twice on the Sunday, I'd swap with you because I think it's what we don't have out here is winter. It's summer, between 30 and 40 degrees and 1,000,000% humidity. And then that minus a few degrees when we're in our so-called winter. Now, that's exaggerating a little bit. It does get, it can get cool. Like every once in a while, it'll get down to between, 0, very, very cold, and, 10.
Rare.
But you definitely see that in the wines in terms of the levels of acidity, etc. It's just not cold enough. There's no real time for the wines to go into dormancy, so that cycle can take place. But still, you would know and you would appreciate that Australia produces some schmick stuff on its own right. So let's take the turn now. So the coolest thing about wine, we alluded to it earlier, or it's not, maybe it is the coolest thing, is that the number of parallels that you can see between wine and the spiritual life. The number of times wine and vines is referred to in the Bible, and the number of metaphors that you can draw. It's just so groovy. It's bordering on cliche. I'm not going to drill you on that, but you're a Catholic. And
yes.
That is something I would be really interested to hear about. So your story as a Catholic, everybody brings different perspectives to their Catholicism, and your story is one that I've heard before in bits and pieces, and it's particularly interesting. So I'll start by asking, born in London, was your family Catholic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Both parents Catholic. Yeah.
Okay, and can you take a little bit of time and just sort of set the scene as to what that was like, what Catholicism meant to you, and what that sort of looked like when you were growing up?
Well, I obviously were in the Nervous Ordo camp growing up. Parents were just following the usual, went to Catholic schools. My parents were always questioning what was going on, because I think growing up in the era, when, for example, I went to do my first Holy Communion, they weren't using olive oil, or, there were little key things that my mum and dad were sort of questioning, and also about the school and about having to learn other people's faiths and never really, learning our own. My parents, to a certain degree, did believe that we were getting a Catholic faith from the schools, but we later found out that, we didn't. We really, really didn't. And it wasn't until we came to tradition, probably my late teens, and really discovered huge gaps. Like, didn't know what a scapular was. We rarely said the rosary. We were pretty much Sunday Catholics. But like I say, little key things. Obviously, my dad being born before the Second Vatican Council, he noticed loads of errors. So when he went up for communion, he'd always kneel, take it on the tongue. Mum followed. Obviously, she saw that when she was growing up. So there was those little things that set us apart, but we were still Nervous Ordo. And then, then the big change. Then Mum discovered the traditional Mass, which was being said in a hotel in London, and that's just before, pretty much about the same time that good old Father Black, who's actually in Australia, he bought 2 churches, but one of them, the big one, which was in London, which is now, like I say, the main church, not the priory, but the main church there. And we started going there. My mum literally upped us all, said, right, we're going 1 hour away to a really dodgy part of town to go and hear Mass in Latin. We were like, what? This is like, we've got a church 10 minutes down the road, walking. Why? But obviously when we went there, we kind of went, oh, hang on, this is different. This is completely reverent and quiet and not happy-clappy. Obviously the current one we were going was with guitars, and even though I'd say that the priest at the time was pretty good, he did try, I think, I don't think he had much support from the local bishops there. One of them, particularly that I mentioned before, my mum said he was an out-and-out communist. So that was the transition. I won't say that we all kind of went along with the changes, as in we went to mass because obviously my mum and dad wanted us to go, but three of us out of four brothers and sisters, we kind of just went to please our parents in a way, whereas my big brother, he was very devout. He'd always shown signs, I suppose, of deeper spirituality, and he ended up going to the Cone to study the priesthood.
Yeah. Okay. So let's stop there and backtrack a little bit. So at the start, you grew up Catholic. And even though, as you grew, your faith developed and took a couple of different, I guess you could call it turns, but could you say that growing up as a family unit, your Catholicism was pretty important to you, even as a family?
Absolutely. I mean, there was no question about us being Catholic. It was just part of who you were, and you knew that there was something else. I mean, my father, in some ways you could have called him a bit of a liberal, but at the same time he would have died for the faith. You just knew that. And my mum was very much like that as well. It wasn't, I probably, they expected us to go, so we went, but it wasn't forced on us.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a huge amount of spiritual reading, or we didn't pray the rosary regularly. So I think that was sort of a bit lacking. But for me personally, are you talking about for me personally?
Well, I guess what I was leaning towards, what I was trying to get at was to the vast majority, a story that you hear very frequently is people grow up, let's say, in a Catholic family, in a Catholic household. They grow up, adolescent, go out, see the world, and decide at one point or another to leave it all behind them. You didn't. And what is so interesting is to hear why those people that chose not to, that chose to go this way as opposed to that way, did that. Because for somebody that doesn't make that decision, that's quite perplexing and intriguing. And I think I'd be safe in saying that your parents were probably big guides for you in terms of the influencing the decision that you ended up making. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, actually, that's 100% true. They did. However, saying that, we all come to the faith at different times, at different degrees, and I always knew they were right. I always knew that there was a God, that there is a God, but it took a few sort of traumas in life, like to actually say, do you know what? Do I actually really believe? Not because my parents tell me, but because I actually. And so it's a bit of a discovery and a bit of a learning curve, and you suddenly decide, I need to know about my faith because I was being challenged. And
can you talk a little? Can you talk a little bit? Sorry, I cut you off. There's a bit of a lag in these videos, which makes not cutting someone off difficult at times. But I'm gonna cut you off anyway. When you talk about your faith being challenged, sometimes those are the most interesting things to talk about. So could you share a couple of instances in which you felt your faith was challenged and you were to really sort of, I guess, reflect and step up to that challenge?
Well, I suppose there were a couple of big episodes in my life. The first one was being at college, modern college as it were. Some of my friends challenging me. There were a lot of drugs at the time. One of my friends was a lesbian and she told me that she liked me, and I was like, this is really difficult. But I was able to tell her in no uncertain terms that absolutely, I can't agree with how she lives her lifestyle, and all that sort of stuff. And I had to say why, and I had to find out why. That caused massive, rift. A lot of my friends dropped me, and that was quite hard because I had to speak out. I had to say I didn't agree. And then I did go out with somebody for a number of years, and fortunately he didn't see eye to eye with regards to the faith, and I just wasn't prepared to to give up my faith. I wanted them to find out more about it, and they didn't, and I had to leave, break up the relationship, and that was pretty hard. And then when you hit those rock bottom moments, I remember praying to Our Lady of Fatima, saying, help me out here. And I really do feel that I got the help, that I needed, because I did have that basis,
Yeah.
that crowd.
When you relay a story like that and you speak about what we've spoken about, the previous minutes of this whole episode, it's really easy to sort of perceive in you quite I'd say a passionate faith. Was it always like that? Let me rephrase it. Was it something that always came to you easily, or was that something that took time to develop, and those I guess harder moments played a role in cultivating your faith?
I guess I could have done things the easy way and just, gone along with the faith and did everything, but I didn't. I wanted to live in the world. I had my feet in two camps. I wanted to be in the world, and I wanted to be a good Catholic. Sometimes that didn't always work out, and it's always been a battle, but God has always won. For some reason, I've just put my trust in God, because I knew that I didn't want to. I'd seen my father had always said to me and explained to me, and I knew he was always right, that you can't always live according to the world. The world changes so much all the time. And he's always been right, He's been dead some of these years, but he keeps talking to me. But I think my faith has won out in the end, because they have given me that strength of character, of believing, having a bit of a backbone, and saying no. It took a while sometimes, and I did go down the other roads, but I came back. And I think that's the key thing, is coming back and getting back up.
So
that's
true.
That's me.
Okay. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about, can you see all the people moving around me? So I'm actually in a house full of people, and I've done so well keeping them all at bay for the past few minutes, but it looks like they're all coming up from the movie downstairs is obviously over, but we're just going to have to make do.
Really pop.
Let's talk about your journey to tradition. So you were at the Novice Ordo growing up. Your parents made a decision at one point to go to tradition, and you said that was pretty confronting, but eventually it just felt right. Can you talk a little bit about that whole experience and what it was like? Do you recall going to your first traditional celebration of the Mass?
Oh, I do. It was Good Friday. It was 3 hours long.
Oh dear, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was all in Latin.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever, every society church that I've ever been to, and I've been to a lot, there's always some strangers, people telling you off if you're not wearing the right thing, or, there's always something you're like.
Not in my church.
Not in your church, right? And the singing in some places. But anyway.
Pretty horrid.
Yeah. So, sorry, I've lost the
No, but that's interesting to talk about. Well, so the question was, what was it like to take that initial plunge into tradition? But because people, I'm sort of trying to approach these issues through the lens of a young person that's trying to come to terms with the fact that they are living what appears to the majority to be a sort of a contradictory life. We live in the 21st century, but we're trying to live a lifestyle that is ancient, like really, really old. And going to traditional forms of Catholic celebration really manifests that in sometimes an embarrassing and cliche way, because what people don't understand is what they're actually going for is the ceremony and the sacraments, not the eccentricity that can sometimes incidentally come along with that. And so it's sort of distinguishing, or even though it is a little bit weird, this is a little bit embarrassing. Oh my God, what if my mates saw me here? I remember at times stories where I think it was a Christ the King procession, and I went to a big grammar school in the area, and I went there the next day, and somebody said, I saw you walking along the road. And I can't remember what I said at the time. It would have been typical if I probably said, nah, that wasn't me. That was that was somebody else. But, there's these challenges and these conflicting moments that we all sort of have to confront one day. So what was that like for you? Was it straightforward, complicated, easy?
Oh, completely. Because obviously I've got huge pride issues, and my brother used to drag us to the Canterbury pilgrimage, for example. And I remember going there in my combat jeans thinking, these are all weirdos. And I'd walk in, and then part of me, my heart was with it, right? Because I loved being out in nature anyway. I loved all the praying. I loved all the singing. I loved being part of the parties in the evening. But coming in and walking into Canterbury, I was so mortified, so embarrassed. I thought, what if someone sees me? So I'd have my dark glasses on. I was smoking a cigarette, and that's how bad I used to be.
How cool are you?
And I was just like on the outside, on the periphery, like walking in to say, I'm not with them. Do you know what I mean? And I remember a couple of times as well that I was really impressed, because even though I was young and I didn't want to be there, again, my brother had taken me to somebody's house, and there was like a rosary crusade, and I think they spent the whole day going along in the tubes. We'd go and pray outside an abortion clinic, and then we'd go through the metro, the tube, what we call the tube. And the guys there, they're really militant. They'd be pulling off all the posters for pro-abortion and all that sort of stuff, and nearly getting caught by the police. And it was kind of exciting. I was like, oh my gosh, these guys are really cool. But at the same time, they're not cool. And I was living, like I say, in these two camps, but always thinking, hang on a minute, there's this militant aspect and this sort of fervour that I had not seen in the new right. And obviously, with my Novus Ordo friends and just regular friends who are non-denominational. But I just remember always thinking to myself, hang on, all these people, they're wearing big fluffy skirts, some of them, but they're really, really cool, actually. They ended up being the coolest ones. And that's what I realised as time went on. And I think the biggest eye-opener for me was when I'd gone through my little bit of a trauma. Again, my big brother saved the day. He put me in touch with two Catholic girls, sisters. And they were amazing. They knew I was pretty new to tradition and been through what I'd been through. And I lived with them for 3 years. And it happened to be just, next door to the church in London. And I used to go to mass regularly, even in my combat jeans. But no one said anything to me. And least of all these two girls, they were just there being excellent friends, giving me books. I just read voraciously and found out about the faith. And as they were just a perfect example, really. And bit by bit, I changed. And I suddenly saw that they were the cool ones and I was the one that wasn't. So, yeah, that's kind of like my story. And seeing things from their point of view and the fact that they were so militant. And going to France was amazing, seeing this MGCF crew who go out and they're very apostolic.
What's
MGCF? Yeah. It's the young French over there from the society. They cover so many different bases. So, all the corporal works of mercy, the visiting the sick, setting up, conferences, just, walking the streets, talking to people. They're fantastic. And I've seen a lot of it in Australia as well. We don't have so much of it in England, but, there was a time in England when we had it a lot more, and it's petered off a little bit, but it's sort of coming back.
And why is that? Is that just a demographical shift or a sort of a insight into the wider society at large, like in terms of apostolicity?
I could be wrong, and maybe I'm not right in all my opinion about this, but you were saying that, you're a cradle Catholic, you're sort of second generation where you've pretty much had the faith and the church and the service, everything has just literally been on a plate. You haven't had to fight for anything. And I don't mean that you personally, because I know that you're out there and you're apostolic.
I think you're pretty close. I don't do a lot of fighting.
But, my era is not mine. Obviously, my parents' era were the ones literally fighting for tradition.
Yeah.
Me, I was sort of like that second one where I'm sort of, the following up what they've been doing. And then the next generation Not so much in my family, because my family, my nieces and nephews are extremely passionate and very, very God-fearing and, militant about their faith. But I'd say a lot of the ones that are coming out from the schools, some of them, not all of them, you know that some of them have lost their faith and they've gone away because there wasn't that militant, I think, fervour that's been lacking.
Never had to work for it. And I think if you would agree with that, I think that's something that you see tragically from even some of the best, what you'd call Catholic schools. And I think what's lacking there is that radical cultivation. I mean, you go back to the basic metaphor that we can draw from grapes, and some of the, that some of the best grapes are grown from vines that, you work with your hands, not machine. Go back to old world styles of pruning, tough terroir, limestone, where the roots have to dig down and work really, really hard to draw the nutrients out of the soil. And you come up with these magical, not mass produced, just that these magical small batch wines. And I think, it's an imperfect analogy, but I think people have to look at, this is just what I think I've, fingers crossed, learnt from watching some people who I think have done a pretty good job raising Catholic families. And it's just this attention to detail and this passion that they have for cultivating a family. The pruning, the shaping of it, the giving it exposure to the right elements, making it work hard, not cotton wooling it, exposing it to adversity. So it has to survive. Who said this thing was simple? But it's that the scary thing is that I think to flourish, it almost requires the acknowledgement that it is quite a complex process.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd have to 100% agree with that. The foundations are the most important, it seems. Yeah,
agreed. So if I was going to ask you one more big question to bring this all together, I've got people standing all over this room. This is funny, you can't see any of them, but they're looking at me wondering how to move around this room, and I'm about to lose my head, but I'm not going to. I'm going to surprise everybody. And I'm not going to lose it. I'm just going to keep concentrating here.
You have wine. You need some wine, I reckon.
I need some wine, but it's Monday of a working week, and I was almost tempted. I decided to go with a tea instead. It was not a bad tea, an English breakfast tea. Hey, chin chin. Yeah,
chin.
That's a tea. That's a tea bag.
Yeah, it's chamomile. It's Monday morning.
There you go. You're groovier than me. So bearing everything in mind that we've just discussed, why are you still a Catholic as opposed to anything else that you could be, bearing in mind that all the different challenges and forks in the road that you faced, you chose to remain a Catholic? If you were talking to a young person who came to you and said, hey, that's quite curious, why are you the way you are? So I'll ask you that. Firstly, why are you still a Catholic? And secondly, how important or what importance does your Catholicism have for you?
It's just one answer, really. It's wine. I mean, God created wine. There is a creator. It's just obvious, really, to me. I don't have the big answer to the question. I guess if it was a young person, obviously don't want to go to hell because it does exist.
So you believe in it?
I've seen miracles in my own eyes, very small miracles over the years, and I think I've met so many different people. I've come across so many people, who have had issues, who've had problems, and I don't have an absolute answer, I'm afraid, but I do know that life is very complicated with its twists and turns. And I have seen miracles. And I think that, I don't know.
That's a really beautiful answer. That is a really nice answer, and that's something that people give all different sorts of answers. Some people go, oh, rationally it just makes so much sense to me, and not everybody can actually appreciate that. Some people, the most tragic thing in the world, and it's a really big reality, that for a lot of people, Catholicism makes sense, yet that doesn't result in the decision to live in conformity with it. So trying to get to the bottom of why do people actually make the decision to I guess, live in accordance with that Catholicism. And I think your answer was quite beautiful, because it inspires you. And I think that's an element of Catholicism that just isn't focused on enough today. People look at it, and from the non-Catholic perspective, it's old, it's tyrannical, it's, power, corruption, and so little time is taken to look at the beauty of Catholicism. And you said Catholicism is wine. That's awesome. It is. It
is. And every part of it is the hard part of growing and nurturing everything. I've read so many books and about existence. I haven't read St. Thomas Aquinas, but I've done some study. I've understood from a rational point of view, but really it doesn't come down to necessary rationality for everybody. For me, just watching the birds and the bees working out there, and how complex this earth is, how complex we all are as people. But it's not complex when you're out there, and you're growing things and you're seeing God's nature and how he's made things. I mean, he's looking after absolutely everything. And I think it's just learning to have trust. But that comes sometimes a bit later for some people.
Beautiful. Tam, I think we're going to leave it there. Tam is somebody who loves growing and drinking wine and sharing her Catholicism with everybody. Thank you so much for joining me in the lounge room. It's been a rip-roarer of a chat, and I really look forward to the day when I can get over there, I can do the Camino, and I can stop by the vineyard, and we can share a glass of whatever the heck you are growing out in.
I can't wait. I'll have all sorts of stuff waiting for you.
Terrific.
Thanks for talking to me.
No, really appreciate it. It's been great.
Okay, God bless.